Hello, I'm Davina William. Welcome to this week's edition of Nzone Focus. First, we head to Central Asia, where our first guests have lived and worked for many years. A new book called From Kabul with Love documents the life and work of New Zealand surgeon Howard Harper as he established eye hospitals in countries which included Iran, Pakistan and Afghanistan. Dr. Harper lived in those countries with his wife Monica and their 3 children, and the book has been compiled by daughter Faith, who now lives in Israel. It's based on the letters which travelled between the remote bases of the Harper family and Dr. Harper's father, who lived here in Auckland. And they paint an intimate picture of a family which relied totally on the every provision coming from God. Dr. Harper and his wife are now based in the UK, but they were recently back in New Zealand to receive the 2011 Kia Award for World-Class New Zealanders, the first time that a missionary has been the recipient. Before heading back to England, he and his daughter Faith joined Alan Lee in the studio.
Well, Faith and Howard, thank you both very much indeed for joining us on the programme. Howard, in a way, you wrote a fair bit of the book because these are your letters, but Faith, you put it all together. Was it strange to be reading such an intimate record of your own parents' and grandparents' thoughts?
Well, actually it was a tremendous privilege because I didn't really know my granddad very well, because we were the old time sort of service people where every 5 years he'd come back to New Zealand. So really I'd met him 2 or 3 times in my life. And so I really got to know him through reading all the letters.
Howard, let's talk about how you ended up in Central Asia in the first place, because you did, was it 2 years of secondary school?
Yes.
So how did you end up in Central Asia?
Well, Mr. Robert Laidlaw, who is a prominent businessman in Auckland and also a very fine Christian leader, he gave some money to the Bible classes in the Auckland area, in the Brethren assemblies, for a competition. So I entered for one of these prizes, and I got, well, it was the first time in my life I ever got any prize, and I think probably the last one, for writing an essay. And so they gave me the life of Hudson Taylor. That led me into Central Asia. Mildred Cable wrote an excellent book on George Hunter, who was a missionary who served in Xinjiang, which is the western province of China, which is largely still today Islamic. So that was how I really got into it. We had a friend from the WEC mission who lived right on the edge of Central Asia. I mean, Central Asia, as far as I'm concerned, in Pakistan, started when you got to the Himalayas and the Hindu Kush mountains. And the people there are totally different. They're tribal, they speak different languages, and they have very little of the culture of Pakistan. They have their own specific culture. The first thing I saw was a large, old British leprosy hospital, and it was filled with patients, and there was absolutely no treatment. All they were doing was feeding them. And I was touched and thought, wow, you know, they need somebody there to help them. I walked out the gate and I was accosted by an old gentleman who had a broken leg, and it hadn't healed properly. And he said to me, "Dr. Sahib," he said, I was not a doctor or a Sahib, but he said, "Dr. Sahib," he said, "please help me. My horse is sick, and you know, I rely on him to travel, to get back to Central Asia." And I said, "I'm sorry, I know nothing about horses nor their illnesses." And that was what really moved me towards medical work.
So you make it sound like it was just a simple step, but of course you had no New Zealand qualifications. No university or medical school in Britain would accept you without qualifications. So basically you had to go back to square one.
Yes, my only, you might say, formal education in that respect was 2 years in the New Zealand Bible College, which of course was a form of education, but not a formal one. And of course, I had no monetary support. I mean, the folk back in New Zealand said, well, yes, of course, wonderful that you're doing this, but we can't afford to, you know, sponsor medical studies in the United Kingdom. But thankfully, my dad said, yes, I'll support you, and he did all that time. And secondly, I learnt about what they call the tutorial system in the United Kingdom, in which they would take you in a very small class, about less than 10 people, and they were superb in coaching you up for examinations. So that was what I did. I had tutors to get me through the preliminary subjects like botany and physics and mathematics and so on, which I knew nothing whatsoever about.
You achieved the degree.
Yes.
And along the way you found a wife.
Yes.
Which was Faith's mum.
Yes.
Which was Monica. Now she had medical training already. She was a nurse, wasn't she?
She'd had some preliminary training in Germany at the Tropical Institute in Tübingen, but she was obviously keen to become a missionary herself, and so wanted to learn English. And so that was why she came to London. And she was, to support herself, was doing part-time work in the Medical Missionary Association hostel, and that was where we met.
But she had had a fairly remarkable life up until then herself, in that she had effectively escaped from the communists and the Nazis by coming across Europe. I mean, that's a fairly remarkable story too.
She was born, and she had no say in this, but she was born quite close to the huge concentration camps. They were also on the border of Poland and Germany. And she was living right on the banks of the river which divided these two countries. And so she knew nothing, of course, of what was going on, the wickedness that was going on in the concentration camps. She was just a little girl when all this happened, 5 or 6 years of age. She had a little sister who was 2 years younger than her, and unfortunately they got onto a train heading into Germany, but of course they were going the wrong way because the Russians were coming behind them and were actually overran them. But in the meantime, the mother had panicked, really. She had a panic attack in the train. It was absolutely squashed with children and women and people. And of course they threw her out on the station platform with the two little girls inside with her sisters of the mother. They never saw the mother again. She was gone. They didn't know if she went to Siberia or whether she was killed in the fighting that ensued. But she really lost her mother when she was 6.
Faith, we were hearing before the break about the remarkable journey that your parents took to reach the point where they were married and working as medical missionaries. It's not often that a child gets to see what goes on before they turned up, because I have a vague idea of what my parents did, but pretty much before I came along it's all sort of in the midst of history. But you had a very intimate knowledge of what they did. That must be different.
I think for me it was a real blessing just to understand through writing the book more of what was motivating, you know, Mum and Dad, and understand more of Dad's calling really from the Lord to Central Asia, and you know what actually was motivating and guiding them to make decisions, you know, and the things that we went through.
Let's talk a bit about Afghanistan, because obviously you both have experience there. In your book, you describe Kabul as a mean sort of place and a disappointing city. Do you still think that at times?
Yes. When we first went there, it was more or less up and coming. They were actually developing it and spending quite a lot of development money. But to this day, it does not have a single inch of sewer, for example. And you think of a city of millions of people, you know, without sewerage, of course, it's not exactly a thrilling place. And you realize that the whole place was run on a shoestring and that the people were putting the money into their own pockets rather than the government being able to tax and get money from them.
Could you describe at one point of when you were setting up the Noor Eye Hospital, 57 visits to the minister?
Ah, well, the Afghans are extremely suspicious. They couldn't believe that somebody would turn up and say to them, look, I can find money to build a free eye hospital, and we will run this hospital at no cost to the Afghan people. We might have to charge small fees, you know, to pay for their medicines and their operations, but this will be a fraction of what anybody else would pay. And they couldn't believe that. They thought we were in it for the money, you know, but we weren't. I never got a single penny for anything I ever did in Afghanistan.
Because when you read the book, I mean, it comes across very clearly that you were poor as church mice and you had nothing.
Yes, that was absolutely right. I just simply had a patch in the back of my pants, and I was, and I was as poor as you could come. That was right.
I mean, what were your memories of growing up in Afghanistan and Central Asia? I mean, it must have been quite hard.
I think as a child, your parents really are the most, you know, create the environment in which you basically grow up. And my mom is a tremendous homemaker. And so she created a very happy environment. And that's really my main memories are of family life, which was, you know, a happy place.
Yeah. Now, you are actually first for me, because you are, in fact, the first Afghani citizen I have ever interviewed. And in fact, you are one of only 2 Afghan citizens who were not born in Afghanistan, is that right?
We were honoured, really, by the king of Afghanistan, who's now dead. But he came back shortly after we did to Afghanistan, and he asked me to come and see him, which was a great honour, and we were surprised to find all his family sitting with him, and he was obviously wanting to honour us, you know. He'd thrown us out at our last meeting, and we'd had to leave Afghanistan because we were Christians, and of course his country was entirely Islamic. But he had come over the years to realize that we were the sort of people that he needed in his country, who were working for his own people without trying to make money from them or trying to do anything really except help them. And so he said to me, Dr. Harper, he said, we really need you here in Afghanistan, and we hope you'll stay. And so anyway, he gave me, the government gave me a passport, and I still have it in my pocket here, close to my heart. And that has enabled us to stay there without any problem during the last 10 years.
By now, most people would have retired, but you appear to have no intention of taking it easy now. Tell me a bit about your current projects.
Well, I've come down to it. I'm now 80, and I've come down to it now and say, okay, I'm living 6 months at a time. So I only think 6 months ahead. And I said to the Lord, well, I'm getting older and I need to, you know, throttle down, you know, get ready to sit on the front veranda and put my feet up. And the Lord said to me after a bit, he said, well, No, he said, I want you to work harder, not softer. And I said, well, Lord, what do you want me to do? You know, because I was surprised. I thought I'd had it, you know. And so he said to me, what I want you to do is to build up 3 points of, you may say, strength around Central Asia. One in Turkey, one in Kabul, Afghanistan, and the other one in Mongolia. Now, you couldn't get 3 more separated places and 3 more different places. And so my 6-month program is ahead of me, is to start a school in Turkey. That would be actually we'd be starting from kindergarten and then going up through the system to build a school in Kabul, Afghanistan, and that will cost us quite a lot of money. But we've got a school there which runs up to the 7th grade already, and then finally to start another school running in Ulaanbaatar, which is the capital of Mongolia. The Lord gave me this vision too for Israel, where Faith is serving, for a school for that country as well, because they have very, very few, you might say, Christian or foreign schools in that country. So that's what we're up to for the coming 6 months.
Do you sometimes feel that this person sitting next to you is actually a whirlwind and you have to try and tame it a bit?
I've never tried to tame it, no.
Just harness it.
I think that's God's job. And my mom's.
That's great. Well, thank you both so much for joining us. It is a lovely book. I feel very privileged to have read it and to meet you both. Thank you.
Okay.